We are ready to go.
Oh, is everybody here already?
Yes.
Well, hello, everybody. Let's call this meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. During this declared state of emergency, the meeting will be conducted in accordance with the California Government Code 54953E as authorized by resolution of the City Council. Please contact city.clerk@mountainview.gov to obtain a copy of the applicable resolution. All members of the Public Safety Advisory Board will participate in the meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing only to observe the live meeting and not make comments may do so on YouTube at youtube.com/mountainviewgov. As noted on the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral public comments online during the public comment period for an item by joining this webinar using the link https://mountainview.gov/meeting and entering the webinar ID 846-5431-1028, or by phone by dialing 669-900-9128 and entering the webinar ID 846-5431-1028. Any emails received by 4:30 p.m. today were forwarded to the PSAB. Emails received after 4:30 p.m. will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. And with that, Ms. Ramberg, would you please take the roll?
My pleasure. Chair Frank.
Present.
Vice Chair Wang.
Present.
Member IR.
Present.
Member Brodowski.
Here.
Member Sandhu.
Here.
Member Tang.
Here.
Member Langton notified staff that he was unable to attend tonight's meeting pursuant to Council Policy K2, which establishes protocols for advisory body attendance. This absence will be recorded as unexcused. I will be providing an overview of the attendance requirements in Council Policy K2 at the November 17th PSAB meeting as part of the agenda item in which the PSAB will adopt its 2023 meeting calendar.
Gosh, I thought I was done having to justify my absences when I graduated, but I guess not. Here we go. Item 3 is oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the advisory board on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the PSAB from acting on non-agendized items. Would any member of the public like to provide comment on an item that is not on the agenda? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. And I need 1 second. Oh, wait. Oh, there it is. Okay. And seeing none. Wait, no, there, different place. Okay, first up is Dana.
Chair Frank, would you clarify the amount of time for public comment in light of the number of hands that are raised?
3 minutes.
Hi there. Good evening. This is Dana Peedy on behalf of MVCPRA. I just wanted to make a quick request for regular updates from the subcommittees. We know that they're doing really important work, but also that sometimes the ball's in somebody else's court or we're waiting to hear back on emails or things like that. So obviously subcommittees might not have, substantive reports every single month, but still I think it would be useful to know what's going on. So I hope you'd consider making a standing agenda item where each subcommittee can just briefly provide a summary of what's going on, even if we weren't able to meet this month. That would just help everyone stay very well informed. So hope you look into that. Thanks.
Thank you, Dana. Tim?
Hi, all. Great to see you on this fine October with the crescent moon coming out. as we have these meetings every month, I'm sure you guys have a sense of some of the things that are important to me and other members of the public. And I just want to highlight one of the lenses that I view public safety through, and I've brought this up multiple times, of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where physiological needs are actually more fundamental and based than safety needs. And I want to mention a thing going on with some of our neighbors in Mountain View. Our unstably housed neighbors who live in RVs are now being forced to move every 3 hours based on the 72-hour parking enforcement, and it's disrupting their housing, which is taking care of those base physiological needs. So it seems a disruption in public safety. I think that it's police officers enforcing the traffic, the 72-hour rule, which is based on my read, my understanding, and what is posted on the city website, is that the rule is about taking care of abandoned vehicles on our street. And if someone's living in the vehicle, it's by definition not abandoned. And I think it's beneath the dignity of our police officers to have to be going and marking people's homes with chalk. And it seems a little bit absurd. And I think that since this falls under traffic enforcement, this is something that conceivably the traffic stop subcommittee could be looking into. I would love to see something like that as a member of the public. I'd also love to see the traffic stop committee looking into depolicing traffic enforcement, since over the summer we had the really scary situation where a Mountain View officer was shot during a traffic stop, and thankfully the officer is safe and was not fatally injured, and the officers were able to catch the person in a manhunt the next day. So depolicing traffic enforcement for our officer safety is something that I think the board could and should look into, and that may fall under the purview of the traffic stop subcommittee. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Mr. Skolnikov.
So I want to provide a counterpoint. We live on Artego. For more than a week, we had RVs parked without moving. There's no chalk marks, nothing. There's trash being thrown on the side of one of the vehicles. Other ones are running diesel generators during the day. And I've asked whether there's a plan to start enforcing the rules, because we're residents on the street and we'd rather not have garbage thrown on the sides. So I was wondering if, and so I reached out to the police department, reported the vehicles. They said they'll enforce it. Nothing has been done. So I'm trying to understand if there is going to be a plan to do the enforcement, because again, kids commuting at school buses stop their vehicles blocking even school bus pickups. So what is the plan?
Thank you. And Mr. England.
Thank you, Chair Frank. Bruce England speaking for MV CPRA as well. Partly echoing some comments that have already been made, but on a different point. We reviewed the meeting agenda and found it strikingly brief. And the one item you do have on there is informational, as opposed to substantive. So we're curious about that, in particular when compared with your past agendas, which were relatively strong by comparison. We're wondering why this is. Items that might have been considered from your existing work plan would be the biannual report on MVPD feedback data, and for mental health crisis response, develop informal community profile and develop outreach recommendations. For the police contact data, develop recommendations to MVPD to make data open and available to the public. And this was previously mentioned, something on Measure C enforcement on the 72-hour parking limit, although your current work plan appears to make room only for staff presentations and subcommittee work, which is unfortunate. As you know, some items were not included in your work plan for the sake of time, that you only have so much time during your meetings. But if your agendas have just one item, that seems to imply that there would have been room for more items on the work plan if you couldn't have included things that are on the work plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Looker.
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, so kind of relate to what Dana and Bruce both had to say with regard to content and cadence and updates. Also calling in for FVC right here. Just wanted to, I know there was some murmurs or thoughts about maybe doing a bi-monthly, I guess that could mean both things, but every 2 months cadence. And I think we were thinking it would be great to do once a month, just because I think it would be good to hear updates again, even if it is, no update. And I think we were just concerned about, I think, momentum and losing momentum. I think this is an important committee, and I, wouldn't want to see it fade away, right? Because then 2 months might turn into 3, turns into 4, and then you just never meet again. And I think that's something we really want to avoid. We think it's important work. We like that y'all are doing it. So just a consideration there for when you do get around to start thinking about the cadence coming forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ramberg, would you like to make a comment about the agenda scope?
I see there's one more public speaker, and I'd be
Just
happy
raise
to
his
do
hand.
that at the end of.
He raised his hand just a second too late. I don't think we have to hear from him. Okay, Mr. Brown.
Oh, come on. You want to hear from me. Hey, and if you change the frequency to be too infrequent, you'll hear from me less. And that's just sad. I love these times. No, I also would rather have a more frequent cadence with, and if it's like fewer items, that's quick meetings. But it's more relevant to be able to stay up to date and also to hear from the public. This is an opportunity. Speaking of, in response to Yakov, vehicle residents are also residents of the city, and their safety, I think, takes precedence over any individual's comfort or like perception of like cleanliness in an area. But I do think that having good hygiene and waste facilities, being able to handle what it's like living in a vehicle is important, and it would be great to see the city prioritize that by having things like regular trash pickup available to people who are living in vehicles. Things that would actually encourage like sanitization and hygiene within the city that would help to make it a cleaner, nicer place, which is safer. It's better to have clean streets and green streets. But I do think that we should focus on the priority of safety first and foremost, and that is for all residents. Thanks.
Very good. Ms. Rambert?
Thank you, Chair Frank. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to a couple of comments regarding the scope of tonight's agenda and the cadence for meetings. And I very much agree that we've got important things on the work plan, and we want to keep momentum and working on them. And there may be space within a meeting agenda to not have too long a meeting, but that's a different issue than the capacity of staff and the subcommittees to complete the work between meetings. And as the last meeting of PSAB was 3 weeks ago, the item that's on tonight's agenda is the item that was ready to come forward tonight, and other items are still well underway, and progress is being made. And sometimes we give interim progress reports, but on something like the mental health community profile, as an example, there was an update last meeting. There wouldn't have been a significant update this 3 weeks later, and there will be a very significant agenda item on this in the next meeting. And I would also like to note that at the November meeting, which is in, again, 3 weeks, given Thanksgiving, there will be an item for you to adopt meeting dates for 2023. And that will also include a tentative agenda listing of when all of your work plan items would be scheduled to come to council. And that is based on when they would be ready to come to Public Safety Advisory Board.
Thank you. All right. And with that, we will now close oral communications and move on to discussion and action items. The minutes approval. Does anyone have any comments or questions regarding the minutes? Hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So motioned.
Now a motion on the floor. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by just Ms. Wang. And then Ms. Ramrick, would you like to take a roll for that?
I will take a roll call vote. Chair Frank,
Aye.
Vice Chair Wang,
Aye.
Member Brodowski,
Aye.
Member Ayar. Sorry, I got off my alphabetized list there.
Aye.
Member Santu
Aye.
and Member Tang.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, scope and frequency reporting to PSAB on MVPD performance and feedback data. This item will be presented by Captain Mike Canfield. You have the floor.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
That's good to hear. Okay. Today's presentation is on the scope and frequency of our reporting to the PSAB and the Mountain View Police Department's performance and feedback. We're going to provide an overview of the numerous methods that the police department uses to collect performance data and receive feedback. And additionally, staff will provide a report on new feedback mechanisms that are under development and an overview on how this information is shared currently with the PSAB and the public, and then seek PSAB input regarding methods to improve our transparency. For a little bit of background, and forgive the information that you already know, but the PSAB was created in December of 2020 by City Council. Our first meeting was in May of 2021. And the board was made to make recommendations to City Council, the City Manager's Office, and the Chief, Police Chief, on public safety matters to further transparency efforts and to serve as a forum for discussion about public safety matters. Currently, the PSAB receives reports, the annual budget report, the annual report, our SRO, we will receive our annual SRO report, the militarized equipment report, and we receive personal complaint data. Those are to support your work, but there are additional feedback mechanisms that currently the PSAB doesn't receive direct reports on, and I'd like to highlight some of those for you today. First off, and probably certainly our largest and our only real-time feedback mechanism is our social media engagement platforms. The predominant platforms that we use now are Facebook, Twitter, and Nextdoor. Some on Instagram, but kind of to a lesser degree and more to tell kind of imagery and stories. These platforms have fairly robust followings. Facebook has 24,000 followers, and Twitter has 26,000, and Nextdoor has 36,000 followers. The different platforms have their own language and style, and the department with very skilled and excellent PIO and social media coordinator, Katie Nelson, and with the assistance and direction of the chief, have been social media pioneers using these platforms to connect and share our story. The philosophy and purpose of our social media is really to drive community engagement, information sharing, and to provide insights into our department's organization and values. But most importantly, and I think one of the things that separates us and as we've utilized kind of at the forefront was using our social media to be a two-way communication mechanism to tell our community the things that we're doing and the culture of the organization, but also to hear what's important to our community and to provide really real-time answers to questions. Next, and this may be redundant as I think the majority of the Public Safety Advisory Board are MVPD alum or MVPDX alum, as are many of the audience members. But MVPDX is an 8-week learning program that's really designed to open, philosophically to kind of open the doors of the police department and to examine our operations and our philosophy and to foster dialogue with our cohorts. We reach out to a broad range of community members and try to bring in differing perspectives to the police department. So we really hear what's important to a large portion of our community. This works in some ways it's almost like a police academy, but it's also an academy for the police department where we get to hear what's important to our community. The program is very adaptable, so the needs and the issues related to public safety can vary from one cohort to another. And it's important for us to stay present with the cutting edge and the most significant issues for our community. and for policing as a whole. Some of the results and the implementations of ideas brought forward by this program are the Latino Community Advisory Council and the Faith Leaders Advisory Council. And additionally, we found an opportunity to implement bias-based training on reporting suspicious activity at our neighborhood association meetings. And forgive the plug, but we are currently seeking cohort 4 members. So if you have not attended a MVPDX, or if you know somebody that you believe would like to attend, please have them reach out to me or through any of our numerous social media platforms to Katie, and we can coordinate them with an application. Next up is the Chiefs Advisory Groups. Now, these are informal groups, but they are the ones I mentioned before, the Faith Leaders Advisory Council and the Latino Community Advisory Committee, LCAC or LCAC. The Faith Leaders Advisory Council is really just what it sounds like, which is a diverse group of faith leaders in the community who meet regularly. They engage in dialogue about relevant issues and community events and things that they're coordinating. And then they look for opportunities to best serve the community and to integrate the police department into those. One of the, or two of the real takeaways, action items that the faith leaders took part in recently, or since their foundation, was the creation of and the assistance and distribution of a number of hygiene kits for our unstably housed community, as well as creating masks, essentially a mask drive, if you will, during the mask shortages of the pandemic. Our Latino Community Advisory Committee, or LCAC, they also meet regularly. That's a group of Latino civic community leaders. They're members of organizations such as the Day Worker Center. There's a parish priest from St. Athanasius, members of Reach Potential Movement, board member IR is also there. We have a member from CSA, El Cafecito, and from the Mountain View Los Altos School District, in addition to the police department, of course. The goal is really to create access and hear voices from the broad range of our Latino community. And I think probably my favorite example of everything comes from the LCAC, and that's issues were brought forward from Latino community members through the LCAC because they felt most comfortable to do it kind of anonymously through the LCAC. And they advised that they believed there was predatory towing occurring by the police department in a parking lot at Latham and Escuela that was kind of predominantly utilized by Latino community members. They believed that the towing was being done by the police department. When we heard this, we began to look into it and determine that it was actually essentially a rogue towing company that was engaging in questionably predatory towing practices. And as a result of our efforts, we were able to have that practice ended, and we were able to stop that kind of predatory towing. But most importantly, we were able to restore faith in those people in their police department, that it wasn't their police department that wanted to tow their vehicles. In fact, it was the police department that wanted to stop the towing, the inappropriate towing of those vehicles. Next up is our essentially a customer service satisfaction platform. The software is called My90. If I say it's customer service, I'm not giving it justice. What it really is a police and community relations surveying tool. It's designed specifically for policing. And currently, people who call the police department for assistance or victims of crime or come to our back counter here at the records counter at the police department, they're kind of randomly reached out to by our computer automated dispatch, our CAD system, and they're sent a link to this fairly robust survey. And the survey is completely anonymous, so the officers don't know who receives it and who doesn't, and who filled it out and who didn't. And it measures kind of standard satisfaction survey things, like how satisfied were you with the service, how well did you feel like you were treated. But it also gathers individual metrics like age and gender and race of the person completing the survey. And then most importantly, and kind of most excitingly, it measures how well, what the opinions of the customers were before before the service, what their opinions were of the police department before the service compared to after they received that service. So it really gives us a very, very clear picture of how our efforts landed with those community members and the people that we're providing service to. And that's a really valuable feedback tool, both for our officers, but also for our department as a whole. But there are also a lot of additional efforts that are under development. And I'd like to just touch on some of those, and some of them will be very familiar to you. Obviously, the RIPA, the Racial Identity Profiling Act data reporting efforts, those are under development. But we also have a pursuit and use of force and complaint data monitoring system that's called Axon Standards, the SRO program report on outcomes and feedback. And you may be aware, but the city and therefore the police department's web pages are in revision and looking at a dramatic overhaul of those as well. I'm just going into detail about some of the in progress feedback efforts. So as you're aware, feedback recommendations for RIPA data are in progress with our subcommittee. And RIPA data, which is really expanded data collection to increase the perceived race and gender and LGBT status, reason for stop, search outcomes, and disposition of calls. It's that kind of robust body of data. But additionally, we ask our officers our own questions that aren't part of the required RIPA state mandate. We ask them if the person that they're contacted appeared to be somebody who was in need of mental health services or was having a mental health problem. And additionally, we asked them, our officers, and this was at the recommendation of research fellow Stevenson, if they believe, or if they were able to identify the race and gender of the person they're contacting before or after the contact. So if they knew who they were going to contact before, or if they knew who the race of the person afterwards. Members of the subcommittee are Member Brodowski and Langton and Chair Frank. And currently they're conducting research. They've actually conducted research and familiarization with RIPA Act, with our RIPA data and our RIPA processes. And now currently they're engaging in community outreach and working on developing recommendations for how to review this data and make it accessible to the community, including scope and frequency. This comes back to the PSAB in January of next year. Next up is our Axon Standards, and that's the software that is designed to provide both red flag monitoring as well as modernizing our complaint data tracking systems. There are future works for public dashboards, but it really does an excellent job of modernizing some of the processes that in policing in general have not been placed into software and have been done in a more kind of traditional paper form. So Mountain View Police Department is a very early adopter of this software. This is a software that Axon who provides our officer-worn cameras. It's software from that company. And we're working now with that vendor on our configuration, its customizable configuration. And this software will house our complaints, track their progress, and provide a really more contemporary and efficient way for that to be monitored. Additionally, it collects data on our complaints, our uses of force, and our pursuit driving, and then applies analytics from this data to provide these early warning systems for behavior that may although the algorithms want it addressed, might not stand out to a person without that kind of background. Those red flags allow the department to provide training and provide additional supervision as appropriate for these types of situations. So we're really excited to see what comes out of this software, but it is early on in its adoption. So we are working now, like I said, with the vendor to create this. But as the PSAB I'm sure recalls, the issue of use of force tracking and early warning and red flags have come up at a number of PSAB meetings in various times during comments. So it seemed like a appropriate software to adopt. As the board is aware, the SRO program annual report on outcomes and feedback will be presented, and this will be presented as a standalone report. And this was identified as a directive by City Council. PD will provide data on the SRO programs, our SRO's time on campus, their outreach and engagement programs, the support that they provide to the district, classes taught, as well as data related to arrests, searches, and detentions. And this was work, I'm sure you recall, that was highlighted in the operational manual. Staff would like to propose an expanded twice annual curriculum, or I'm sorry, current feedback, expanded current feedback mechanisms. So looking at all of these feedback mechanisms that we receive now, there's a lot of valuable information that we can provide, that staff can provide to you. By receiving expanded feedback reporting, including data, program summaries, themes, and actions from MVPDX, LCAC, faith leaders, our social media presence, the My90 surveying tools, combined with the complaint data and the upcoming SRO complaint data, you'll have a greater understanding of our community feedback and have more data to examine and compare together. And by combining these items in a twice yearly schedule, you'll have more time to discuss and review the information that's presented in them. So as you're aware, this would be a change from your quarterly data updates for complaints. The twice yearly report will include complaint data. I'll just go over kind of some of the details that would be provided in this twice yearly report. Complaint data. So still in this kind of twice annual process, you'll receive information about the size. Let me see. I'm sorry, I'm missing my notes here. I'm kind of blanking out. There we go. Pardon me. Providing reports on complaints twice annually will increase the data size and allow for better examination of complaint trends. And in the future will allow for integration of that red flag system, the Axon Standards, into the reporting. With, I think it's 8 year-to-date complaints and as few as 2 a quarter, staff believes that twice annually will be an improved and a more appropriate reporting schedule. And the major categories will still continue to be presented. As far as our social media, the PSAB will receive an update on our social media use, including the types of posts shared, the themes and community comments, the number of posts, the number of views, the engagements and impressions, and those the definitions of those terminology. From MVPDX, the PSAB will receive the number of participants, feedback received from the cohort, and what follow-up the PD has taken. From our chiefs advisory groups, the PSAB will receive updates on the topics and follow-up resulting from both faith leaders and LCAC advisory group. From My90, a summary of the data collected related to customer satisfaction and the impacts of our police officers' work on their customers will be presented. And now RIPA is still under still out, and you guys will receive a recommendation in January. However, certainly it's not out of the question to requested this information be presented twice annually with the other feedback. And it's important to note, with the new systems that we're working on and things that are under development, we'll continue to evaluate what best fits in and what other information we can provide to you in this twice annual presentation. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Captain Canfield. Would any board members have any questions before I open this to public comment? Cal.
Yes, thank you, Captain Canfield. I just had a few observations and to ask. And the first thing is kudos for I do love the social media, especially the Facebook interaction we can have with the MVPD. That's good. But can you find a way to make sure there are no spammers who take advantage of commenting and trying to sell you merchandise? And then they try to tag you because for example, I had made a comment or asked a question, they would tag us and the tag shows that there's a pain in the rear. But if that's a way Katie can figure that out, that'd be splendid. The other thing is, when you were showing the slides, I noticed that one part of a boxing sparring with the kids, why was the officer in full gear with weapons on his body when this is a sparring? I assume that was a sparring session. It could be just a one-off. Just my observation there. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to answer both of those questions. I think it's a complex problem with scammers. The new one of the new scams is these scammers who are vendor scammers in the comments section. It's not something Katie can fix. Unfortunately, as brilliant as she is, this is a kind of universal problem across this platform right now. So it's going to really require a broader approach from Facebook. And the only solace I can provide you is that it's everywhere, not just us. But also don't, for anybody watching who might not know, please don't ever assume that those vendors are honest in selling police department merchandise. We will never send things in that manner or try to sell t-shirts. And related to the photo with Sergeant Ekdow, my guess, honestly, is that he probably stopped in during a training that was happening. Mike was a very active, he's retired now, but when I saw that photo, he was such an active member of our Police Activities League and worked so hard with our youth. I really wanted to include it. And Mike's been a boxer and a pugilist of sorts, an amateur, I think, karate practitioner and one of our main instructors for decades, I think since he was probably 15, and he's of retirement age now. So I'm sure that he wasn't in a full sparring session in his full kit. My guess is he dropped in and maybe was playing with some kids that he knew or training a little bit with some kids he knew really well, or that he was taking a photo opportunity and he happened to be in uniform.
Great, thank you. And the last thing is, RIPA, is that a federal act or is it a California act?
RIPA is California only.
Thank you, Cal. I didn't see who was next, so I'll go with Joan.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to almost the first thing you reported on, Mike. You said that in the social media, now I don't get onto social media, so I'm assuming that lots of people will go to Facebook and go to the Mountain View Police Department page to, what do they do? Do they see content? Do they
Yeah, there's I believe the number was 24,000 followers, most of whom are local. Those are as well. So I'd say Facebook is very common or very, very followed social media platform. But for our neighborhood engagement, with 36,000 followers, Nextdoor is one of our biggest platforms, and it does provide an opportunity to tailor the message to a specific neighborhood. So let's say there's a gas leak, but it's, maybe perhaps Joan, it's in your neighborhood, but it doesn't affect the rest of the city. We could push that message out just to the members that are following us from that area. And that provides us with a really specified ability of sharing or to share information in a really specified area, which is very valuable for Katie and for our social media team.
Well, what does it mean when you say there are 24,000? It means these people have signed up to watch Mountain View Police Department in Facebook?
Yes, correct. Yeah, so we have essentially people have opted in to be followers of, they're on the platforms already. So they have in the case with all of these, a free membership onto these platforms. And then they've selected to see the content of these platforms. So they've opted into seeing what Mountain View Police Department is sharing. At times, I don't know if we've done a recent study, and I don't know if the data is still presented in the same way as it used to be, but the majority of our followers were local Mountain View residents or people who were associated to the immediate mountain, either worked or lived in the city of Mountain View, which is by design and based on the content that's provided.
And then you can send them individually or all of them at the same time, something they've asked for, or it's just that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So what Katie does, so our social media coordinator, Katie Nelson, and she's not the only one that can reply, but she is our primary and clearly our most skilled social media coordinator. or our only social media coordinator, but our most skilled social media expert. She will evaluate, she'll post significant incidents or important things that are relevant to the community. Sometimes they're about our officers, sometimes they're about really significant cases where we need leads or we need help, or they're just about information sharing. For example, a gas main breakage. Now, there may be questions, we will monitor that. Not like you would monitor 911, but we monitor it for questions and concerns. And somebody might say, for example, my son is home alone right now, and he lives at Latham and Escuela. Is he going to be affected by this gas leak? And Katie would then see that and say, well, that really requires a direct message. She can provide, insights and information about where the leak is and the access of vehicles, and say, well, Escuela is blocked off by fire trucks, but Latham is open right now. If you need to get home, you can take that route. But if your child needs to, or you need to call us to go check on their welfare, reach out to this number and we can send somebody out there. So it really is an engagement tool. It's not just we're not pushing just information out, but we're really looking for what people are saying or what they need from us in engaging in that platform.
Okay, well, one more question is there a way that if I were to be one of your 24,000 from Facebook, would I get a message in my messages or some way if there was, for instance, a gas leak in my area?
Yes, the Facebook is a little more tricky, and that's why I know Chris and Katie both like to say that these different social media platforms are kind of like their own languages. So we speak Facebook, but we also speak Twitter, and we speak Nextdoor. So if you needed to receive a notification of something significant, like a gas leak, Facebook isn't the best platform for that. Likely it's Twitter or Nextdoor, and you can opt in to receive an email or a notification on a mobile device when those are pushed out. Facebook, every time we push out a message, it doesn't go to every single follower. To do that requires payments each time, and I don't think that that's standardized with law enforcement or public safety organizations. Twitter, on the other hand, and Nextdoor, it's different, and it's more everybody receives in that area receives the message, or every follower on Twitter can receive it based on how they set their settings.
Okay, thank you for the education.
Absolutely.
Member IR.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of questions. One is, where can I get my hands on some MVPD merch? Because I never buy anything from social media. So, text me, please, Mike. My second question is, I'm a little uncomfortable with only hearing about complaints every 6 months. I don't know if there's a happy medium. I don't mind. I don't know if there's such a thing as run-of-the-mill complaints, right? But I don't want to be the last person to know if there's a major complaint against MVPD. So I'm I don't know if this is a solution or not, but I'm musing about if a complaint happens within a month where it reaches a certain level. I remember your charts. If it's major and ticks certain boxes, I wonder if we should just plan to hear about it. I again do not want to be the last person. I don't want to be told by my neighbor or somebody that there's a major complaint when I sit on this board. I'd rather hear it directly from the MVPD. So I'm struggling with that right now with the 6-month cadence, but I understand, and I hope it continues, that there's minimal complaints. That's great. But what happens if there's a major complaint in a given month? And I'd like some sort of workaround for that case. Thank you.
Member Tang.
I had a couple questions about the Ripa data. It just occurred to me that many of these are perceived traits. So I'm wondering if one person gets stopped by 2 officers, or multiple officers are interacting with the same person, do each of the officers file a Ripa data point? Because what if the perceived status of that person is like perceived differently by two different officers. That's one question. And then my other question is, well, I can't, for some reason, I can't publicly view our minutes. So I don't know if I made this up. And I can't verify that, but I have a feeling like, didn't we talk about some feedback mechanism for SROs that was anonymous for students? And if so, if I'm not just making this up, what's in place for that?
You're not, yeah, you're
Okay.
definitely not making it up, I promise.
Thank you.
I'm
not crazy.
The ability of our teachers, parents, and students to make complaints or give feedback on our SROs anonymously. We don't want to receive it. We really, the belief and the work that the department and what was in the manual that you guys received indicates that it's best if it's handled at the district level, so they receive the concerns. Because if somebody's concerned about bringing information forward, probably it's not best to have them come to the police department if they're going to complain about an SRO, especially kids who are going to feel inherently a little bit more intimidated. So we are working on identifying who those representatives are. In fact, that was some of the feedback when we were looking at the operational manual, was ensuring that that was identified. We can't say who at a district needs to receive it, but we are working to ensure that there's an identified person and a kind of a formula or a formalized rather process for that. Regarding the complexities of identity and RIPA, there are people who identify as different genders, and on one call they may look different at one stop than on another. The officer is going to just go with their personal belief of what they perceived. Same if somebody is ambiguous in their appearance, or an officer perceives somebody to be different. Our officers are denoting their perception. It doesn't mean that it is exactly what the person is, and that's the direction from the state and the state RIPA boards, which are consist of sociologists, community organizers, community activists, a broad range, and law enforcement representatives, but a broad range of people. And this was the best formula they came up with to monitor this. But it's certainly not perfect, but it does provide a lot of information, a lot more information.
Right. But my I guess my real question was like if multiple officers at one time are like interacting with the same person.
Oh, okay. So let me
yeah.
That will only be denoted by the primary officer. So if there's 4 officers contacting Joan, only one of those officers will enter in that data, and that will be done and only one of them can, based on the number. So the system identifies errors. In fact, when we first started, like many other agencies, we had a couple of errors, and often they were either people had contacted 4 people, and the system requires that you move the contacts by 1 minute apart. If you're one officer has to separate those, and they put them all at the same time. If, for example, all 4 of those officers were to try to denote the contact with Joan, that would get bumped back as an error as well.
Good. Member IR.
Thank you, Chair. Eva's question made me realize I have another question, which is, say 4 officers do go to visit Joan. Does Joan get 4 survey requests?
No, so there'd be one CAD or computerized automated dispatch entry for Joan. So no, it would be a random selection. So Joan may or may not receive a My90 feedback request.
That's random.
That is randomized. Yeah.
And then it's to assess the visit as a whole, not a specific officer?
Well, it's the impact that the officer had. If Joan felt she was treated with respect, if she felt that what her opinion was before the contact of the police department, and what her opinion was after the contact of the police department. So that would be something that it would record. And if Joan was visited, Joan, I hope you don't mind that we're using you as the person being contacted, but we contact a lot of people for various reasons. If we contacted Joan 4 days in a row, she'd have a 4 times higher chance of being entered in the, into the receiving the system. So she could, in theory, if it's a random number generator, receive 4 surveys, or she could receive 0. I'll be honest, I don't know the frequency with which those are sent out at this time. We've had the system on board for a couple of months now, so it's new.
Okay, but Joan, again, if Joan were to receive a survey, she would be asked about her experience overall, not with Officer 1, Officer 2, Officer 3, and Officer 4.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a sense of how many surveys would go out a month?
Well, I think it's dependent. I don't know what the percentage is. It's certainly something that I could find out how many they're sending out, or what the percentage of our dispatch calls are, or CAD calls are. My guess is that it's based on the number of calls. It's some type of percentage, and not necessarily like we want 1,000 a month, if that makes sense. Because if we had 1,000 a month and we had 2,000 calls, I mean, those are, they're just rough numbers, then we'd have half of them. And I don't know if that's the goal. So I think it depends. It just depends on how many calls per service we have.
Thank you.
Mike, I just have one quick question, and that is, so I was on a campus the other day, and there was an officer from a different agency. Are you set up to sort of differentiate when other agencies have experiences on our campus? Are you able to capture that data and differentiate it so that that it wasn't our officers? Because his demeanor, I felt, was a little different than what ours might be, because he wasn't an SRO.
Yeah, so we don't put a non-Mountain View officer on campus.
Correct.
Yeah, we don't have a mechanism for tracking. The only CAD, I'm just thinking, if the agency contacted us and notified us that they were going to the campus, we would create a CAD. There would be a CAD incident indicating that somebody was on that campus. But we wouldn't necessarily know the name of the officer, just the agency that was phoning in to let us know. And that would be done by their dispatch center. So likely, right now, the short answer is no. And it would be pretty complicated to find out. However, if, consistent with the complaint mechanism, if we were to receive a complaint about an officer from another agency via that formalized complaint process, that's certainly something that we would reach out directly to their equivalent of a professional standards unit and notify them of, and allow them to investigate as appropriate.
Understood. Thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions from the board, I will move on to members of the public. If there are any members of the public that would like to provide comments on this item, please do so by clicking the raise hand button or pressing *9 on the phone. And 1 second. Mr. McKenzie, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you for the report. I want to call out a specific thing that I really appreciate about the proactive work that you're doing with neighborhood associations to address bias in calls into the police department, because I remember during MVPDX, officers mentioning that sometimes they would be called to basically on a person of color for existing because someone had called them in, and being proactive to address the bias in our community is something that is really appreciated, and I want to commend you for that. I like that there is an anonymous reporting mechanism if there is something going on with an SRO and a student wants to report something. That's nice. Although I question why, if kids might be inherently intimidated by officers, we're bringing them onto campus. And I would hope that in the MOU or the SRO procedure manual, there is some sort of mechanism to address the situation the chair just brought up, which was, I appreciate learning about that. Thank you very much for bringing that situation forward. Because if there are non-Mountain View Police Department officers on campus, that weren't called in there for some reason. That seems really strange to me. Thank you.
Okay. And that looks like that would be it for public comment. I will now bring it back to PSOB. If there are any other board members who have additional questions. Very good. I just would like to quickly address Mr. McKenzie that that officer was on campus doing county business, so he had a purpose for being there. It wasn't like a surprise visit or anything. I don't know what he was there for, but he was from the county and he had something specific to be there for. Number 6, moving on. The next item is board and staff comments, questions, and committee reports. No action will be taken on any questions raised by the PSOB at this time. Do any PSOB members or staff have any comments or questions? Such a quiet bunch tonight. All right, then we will now move on to the final item on tonight's
Chair
agenda.
Frank,
Yes. Oh, wait.
I'm
Thank you.
seeing
Aye,
a couple of hands up, and I will be happy to go after all the board members have had a chance.
Very good. Member IR.
Good try, Chair Frank. Good try. So I just wanted to give an update because I've been involved separate from my PSAB duties in the situation with the enforcement of Measure C and the ramifications on our neighbor with the reinforcement of the 72-hour parking rule. And I just wanted to give a quick update and raise a couple of concerns. One is I wanted to commend the PD on the compassion they've shown since Measure C enforcement has gone into effect, which was at the beginning of this month. No one has actually been towed yet. I think around 10 tickets have been given for Measure C violations, and about 50 tickets have been given for the 72-hour rule. So I think all things considered, that's not too bad. And I think the PD is to be commended for approaching the enforcement with a degree of compassion and not just going gung-ho about towing everybody. I've also found out that it's very work intensive to cite folks for 72 hours. So if we think about the enforcement right now, there's Measure C, which is the narrow streets bike lane measure, and the 72-hour rule. It's work intensive to give cite for 72-hour rule. Basically, a complaint has to come in, then the PD needs to go out. It's a group of 4 or 5 people right now that go out. They have to chalk the tire. They then have to, they turn their body cam on and kind of video the scenes, exactly which vehicle, where it's located. And then they have to fill out a yellow form with all the details about the vehicle, tear off the bottom half and leave the top half. That's a warning. 72 hours later, and usually it's 4 or 5 days later because nobody sticks to a 72-hour schedule, the same officer comes back with those bottom half of the yellow cards, tries to match them up, and then writes, if they find a vehicle in the same place, right, with the chalk mark around the tire, they then issue a citation. And then the theory is, coming back 72 hours later, if the vehicle still hasn't moved, they would then tow it, right? So it's very it's very time intensive, work intensive about who's doing what. And you don't typically hand off your torn yellow forms off to somebody else to implement it. You kind of go back and you see it through. I've also been hearing that some citizens are getting very zealous about enforcement. There was the gentleman who spoke up earlier from the public talking about trash. I think that's a reasonable concern to express. And something should be done about it. But however, there are some citizens who I think they're part of the police force who have taken upon themselves to bike around the city trying to document every infraction that they see and then sending it to city council, sending it to the police. And I'm not exactly sure what their intention is, but to me, it seems to be a very, like there is no room for compassion kind of space, right? Just you break the law, you're out, right? No chances, no understanding, no appreciation that the fact that this population of folks has been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, right? And are still trying to come out of that, right? But there's just no space. I've also heard that business owners are getting aggressive about parking spaces being taken, and that when they get visited by local CBOs in the area who are serving this population, that they are getting very aggressive, and there's fears of violence by these business owners. I feel, I can't help but feel, I guess, to come to the conclusion that the actions of how this 72-hour ordinance, which is a state ordinance, however, is up to the city to decide how to enforce, if to enforce, how to enforce, has somehow created this us versus them mentality in the city that I'm really concerned about. I don't like going to Nextdoor, but I've been going to see what people are saying, and people are saying very, very things I wouldn't expect people to say in this area. I don't know what the solution is, because there is nowhere right now for these folks to go. There is progress being made on opening additional safe lots, but the latest thinking is it might be 4 or 5 months before spaces are made ready. What I would like to see, because I really think something needs to be done to just de-escalate. We talk about police de-escalation all the time. There needs to be some sort of de-escalation on this issue. I don't like what I'm seeing. I feel really uncomfortable. I would like to see parts of the streets that are not narrow streets, that do not have bike lanes, that have been marked in this 8 miles of potential place to park. I would like some areas marked as safe for people to park. And maybe those are the streets that are not directly in residential neighborhood areas, right? Perhaps. And I would like to see those parts of the street not enforced as 72 hours. And I'd like to see more proactive waste pickup, sewage pickup, to avoid the trash issue, which is a concern, right? Nobody wants to see trash, especially hazardous waste, all over their streets, right? But I just want to register my concern of where the city is going and what this issue has brought. No one really wants to go into detail now. It's election season. I get it, but I would like us to think about this as a body, about what we can do to help our neighbors going forward. I don't feel safe for them, and I don't feel safe for myself at the moment. I'm not liking what's happening with this. Thank you.
Member Brodowski.
Thank you for bringing that up. I haven't been on top of what's going on with the RVs at all. And so what you're telling all of us is really concerning. And I agree with the sense of what you're saying. I think it's terrible to have this way of dumping on people who are in trouble. So thank you.
Ms. Rambert.
Thank you, Chair Frank. I had a few things I wanted to report on to the advisory body. First, as you may have heard, Governor Newsom will be lifting the California state of emergency related to the pandemic at the end of February, and our city manager made an announcement at this past Tuesday city council meeting that the city of Mountain View will be following suit. Related to that, the state assembly proposed and the governor signed legislation that extends excuse me, some of the flexibility in the Brown Act that had been in place because of the state of emergency, but not all of it. And it was that state of emergency that basically allowed legislative bodies such as the City Council and the advisory bodies like PSAB to meet remotely without a physical meeting space. And without posting of the locations where people were meeting individually, and allowing for public comment and access at those individual locations, all of which have been longstanding provisions of the state's Brown Act, which is a kind of sunshine law, open meetings law. So this new legislation does allow some continuation of that, but under pretty strict parameters in terms of what the reason is that a legislative body member can participate remotely and how frequently they can do so and how that all needs to be noticed. Then that also relates to kind of my third announcement is that for the council's meeting on this coming up Tuesday, they will be considering passing another monthly resolution that would continue for 30 days going forward. The ability to have the remote meetings, which is still allowed because the state of emergency has not yet been lifted. And so that would cover the PSAB's last meeting, which is November 17th. There is no December meeting for the PSAB. And so just that degree of certainty is to know that your next meeting will continue to be remote, but we are anticipating the return to in-person meetings in January, and I will be getting back to you to communicate more about that, likely at our next meeting.
Very well. Anyone else? Okay, I just wanted to say I had this conversation with the chief the other day about enforcement of the 72-hour rule and some of these other things, and I personally will be minding my own business when I see people parked on the street. They are citing, in my neighborhood at least, cars of people who live here that don't move their cars every 3 days, as well as any other vehicles. But I don't think that the police department has the flexibility to not enforce a law that is on the books. They have been sort of exhibiting compassion and providing resources, but at the end of the day, it's law enforcement, so their hands are somewhat tied in that area. Mike, you had a comment?
I do, but I just wanted to be in line, just related to the SRO operational manual. Staff, Wahid and I really appreciate, and Assistant City Manager Ramberg appreciate the effort and input that PSAB provided on the operational manual. And we went ahead and made some additional changes. Some of the issues we did find were addressed in specific areas, and other things were more for operational conversations between us and the district. But we did make a number of additional changes, or will be making a number of additional changes based on your comments during the last PSAB meeting. And then we'll be finalizing our operational manual.
Cool. Thank you.
And Mike, am I remembering correctly that that's going to be posted on our city website?
Yes, you are remembering correctly. The city and the police department website will be, that'll be posted.
And Member Hour?
So I just want to reiterate what you said, Chair. Thank you. I think the PD needs to enforce laws that are on the book. And I think the best that they can do is to show compassion with how they do the enforcement. I'm just concerned what this ordinance, which does not have to be there, right? The 72-hour ordinance does not have to be there. I'm concerned what it's doing to the city. And that you don't, say I decided to host an RV in front of my driveway, right? Or on the street in my court, and I was okay with that this, anybody else who's just driving by, right, could decide to complain about the RV, even if they don't live in my neighborhood. And I don't know what drives people to do that. And I'm just questioning what's happening.
Yeah.
It's who cares if it's in front of my house and say the waste and the the trash are all taken care of. Why is it your business, random person, to come and complain about what's in front of my house, right? And that's what I'm concerned about. I think the level of civility in the last month has really gone down. And being a person of color myself, I'm worried. I'm worried for my safety when I see people get angry. I've seen the vitriol on Nextdoor. I'm concerned. What is happening to our wonderful city?
Understood.
Thank you.
Cal, and I'll just give the warning that we have to keep our comments somewhat light because we can't discuss heavily items that are non-agendized. Cal.
I echo Kavita's concerns. It is sad. It is sad, but it's sad that human nature gets so low. But I think the most important thing is in each of our own neighborhoods, we have to work together and to make sure that, we try to help whoever we can. I live in Castro City, which was not the best area before, but it's getting to be a little bit gentrified, but so be it. We have a great multiracial combination here. And, I just noticed walking Yogi every morning that all the RVs at Cristano have disappeared. I don't know whether that's due to the construction of the pool, but it was kind of bizarre that they are completely gone. But I did see the lot at Evelyn beyond the Cal station, that's getting to be quite full. So we need to help anyone we can who are in a predicament, especially kids who are living in these RVs. We should just show some humanity. And if we just start working with our local neighborhoods and then talking to friends, I think that will bring our standards back to where they always been, to caring of the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And with that, I believe we can adjourn at 8:13 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Great to see some of you in
Good seeing
person.
you.